The woman only showed a bit of her bangs while parking, yet a morality officer accused her of trying to seduce men, pointing at her and hurling filthy insults. The disgusting words left her terrified and helpless, and she could only leave with her daughter in frustration. She tried desperately to convince herself it was no big deal, but tears of humiliation still slid down her cheeks. This was Tehran in the 1980s, a place where women's very existence seemed utterly ignored. They were required to go out dressed in robes and headscarves, meant to cover every curve of the body, to prevent men from having improper thoughts. Even just running on the street could make the police suspect a woman of trying to entice men, because, they claimed, a woman's hips would sway when she ran. Even children weren't spared. If a piece of clothing had a label with Michael Jackson's face on it, that too was forbidden, especially at school. Teachers constantly warned students, women who dressed immodestly were committing a terrible sin, and after death they would burn in hell. To any normal person, these claims sounded absurd, yet they became dogma used to educate the next generation. 14-year-old Marjane grew up in this environment. She couldn't understand how her homeland had become like this, because in her early childhood, no one wore veils. Women had freedom to dress as they pleased. Society was open and tolerant, and life was carefree. Marjane herself grew up happily, under the loving protection of her parents and grandmother. But then, almost overnight, war erupted. Chaotic forces swept across the country, and women's status plummeted to the very bottom. Their food, clothing, and daily life were strictly controlled. There were no books to read, no entertainment to enjoy, as if anything that brought joy had been declared contraband. To make a living, many small vendors began secretly selling banned goods, hiding them inside their clothing. Marjane, eager to buy a cassette of her favorite idol, ventured out alone to find a seller. After bargaining back and forth, she finally got the tape, but while she was lost in excitement, she didn't notice two figures quietly approaching, inspectors tasked with catching women whose clothing didn't comply. When they saw Marjane wearing white sneakers, a shirt with pop song lyrics, and a Michael Jackson badge on her chest, they prepared to take her away. Marjane instantly put on a pitiful act, claiming she had no mother, and if her stepmother found out about this, she would beat her to death. Perhaps out of a sense of female empathy and pity, the inspectors decided to let her go. When she got home, Marjane played the long-awaited cassette, pretending her racket was a guitar, reveling in this hard-won moment of happiness. But happiness never lasted long. A bomb suddenly landed near her home. Although Marjane and her parents were unharmed, their neighbors weren't so lucky. Marjane saw with her own eyes a neighbor's severed arm, a gruesome image that left an unshakable scar on her heart. And yet, on this land filled with bombs and ideological chains, her teacher told the class, "A new era has arrived." Marjane immediately spoke up. The war had already killed 300,000 people. The teacher was lying. Her bold words earned roaring applause from her classmates, but made the teacher furious. That night, the school called Marjane's home, warning that if she kept this up, no one would be able to teach her. After hanging up, her parents knew all too well how dangerous the times had become. Marjane was their only daughter. If anything happened to her, they couldn't go on living. After much inner struggle, they decided to send 14-year-old Marjane to Vienna. On the night before her departure, her grandmother came to her room to keep her company, and gave her a piece of advice Marjane would carry for life. Always stay true to yourself. The next day, when her parents took Marjane to leave, it was her first time being so far from home, and she couldn't hold back her tears. Her mother comforted her, saying, "You're a big girl now, you can't cry." But as Marjane walked into the departure hall with her luggage, her mother suddenly collapsed to the ground. Marjane turned back, just in time to see her father carrying her mother away. It turns out, the ones who tell you not to cry are often the ones who are hurting the most. Away from her parents' protection, Marjane now had to face a completely new life on her own. But her days in Vienna were nothing like what she imagined. She stayed only 3 days at her mother's friend's house, before being sent off to a boarding dorm under some excuse, because of lifestyle differences with her roommates. The once lively, cheerful Marjane slowly closed herself off. She washed her clothes alone, cooked alone, and her only favorite pastime was wandering the supermarket. The rows of dazzling products could make her forget her troubles for a moment. Marjane's solitary way of living caught the attention of a few eccentric classmates. Her unique nationality and background made her stand out, and she soon blended into their small circle. Under their influence, she caught a glimpse of Vienna's wild side. She tried hard to make herself just as crazy as everyone else. But when Christmas came, all her friends were with their families, and she was left completely alone. Not wanting to worry her parents, she lied on the phone, claiming everything was fine, while her parents, over and over, reminded her to buy good food and take care of herself. That thin telephone line could never carry the depth of their longing for each other. With nowhere to go, Marjane returned to the dorm, boiled some noodles just to fill her stomach, but the nun in charge deliberately picked on her, saying that eating straight out of a pot was disgusting, and even adding that people from her country had no manners. Marjane couldn't hold back her anger and cursed at her. But in the end, she was expelled from the dorm. From then on, she began a life without a fixed place to live. She stayed in apartments, stayed in attics, sometimes rotating between friends' houses to better fit in. She read many books, but still couldn't understand the culture around her. When alone, she often felt anxious. Her family was suffering in a land of war and oppression, while she was living a carefree life abroad. This contrast tore her apart. To escape the pressure on her mind, Marjane started indulging herself recklessly. Time passed like this, and she grew from a little girl into a young woman, her thoughts gradually changing. At a dance party, she even lied to men, claiming she was from romantic France, but fearing she'd be exposed. She made an excuse and left in a hurry. On the way home, her shadow under the street lamp seemed to turn into her grandmother, posing a question deep in her soul. Her grandmother asked why she pretended to be French, but Marjane said that every time she revealed where she came from, she was mocked. Perhaps this conversation was what woke Marjane up. Later, when people gossiped about her behind her back, she would respond with confidence, "I am Iranian, I'm proud of it." Time flew by. 3 years later, Marjane gradually learned how to live with herself. Though her old friends graduated and left, she quickly made new ones, and even found her first boyfriend. But this first love came suddenly, and ended just as abruptly. After just one night together, he broke up with her, saying the reason was that he wasn't into women at all. The man hugged her and thanked her, because it was she who helped him realize his own sexuality. Not long after, a second man appeared. Blinded by love, Marjane threw herself completely into the romance, losing herself in its sweetness. They lay on the grass together, gazing up at the sky. They played in the snow together. Her boyfriend would carefully read aloud the scripts she wrote, and she admired his talent with all her heart. Marjane thought this love would end beautifully, but to her shock, the man deceived her. She saw with her own eyes her boyfriend wrapped in another woman's arms. This love that ended in lies and betrayal left Marjane devastated. She mocked herself as nothing but a fool. Shattered, Marjane spent all her money and began wandering the streets. She picked up discarded cigarette butts, ate food from trash cans, living like a beggar. Drifting aimlessly through the city, the biting cold wind made her sick. She coughed constantly, even spitting up blood. The sad irony was, the war back home hadn't taken her life, but a trivial romance almost did. Marjane collapsed on the street, fortunately rescued and taken to a hospital. The doctor told her she had bronchitis and could never smoke again. When the doctor asked, "Where is your home?" she answered without hesitation, "Iran." No matter where she was, no matter how broken her homeland seemed, it would always be her home. She immediately called her family. She told her father she wanted to come home, but didn't want to explain why. Hearing this, her parents instantly promised not to ask any questions. As long as she came back, that was enough. Parents always save the best for us, respect our every choice, and no matter what happens, home is always open to us. Marjane returned to Tehran, Iran, true to their word. Her parents never pressed her about what happened in Vienna. Instead, it was Tehran's situation that worried Marjane deeply. Her father told her, though the war had ended, light had not arrived. A meaningless civil war had claimed the lives of over 1 million young people. Countless families had been torn apart. While the power-hungry lined their pockets, the city lay in ruins. Walking down the streets felt like passing through a graveyard. Marjane went to visit a childhood friend, only to find that her friend had lost an arm and a leg in the war. Marjane suddenly realized that compared to her friend's suffering, her own so-called troubles were nothing at all, and she had no right to sink into despair. So she pulled herself together, and applied to university, since there was no real history here. No open-minded culture. She chose to dedicate herself to art, but even art class came with absurd restrictions. In drawing class, every female model's body was wrapped tightly in black robes, and students could only see their noses. Marjane couldn't understand what kind of art was supposed to come from this. Every 2 days, the school held a morality assembly, and the content was always predictable. Rules on how women should dress and behave. The school leaders sternly stressed, women must wear longer headscarves, looser robes, show no body curves, no hair, no makeup. Hearing this, Marjane immediately raised her hand to argue back. The leaders were left speechless by her rebuttal. When her grandmother heard about this, she praised Marjane endlessly and warned her, never forget, it's fear that makes people lose their judgment, and fear that turns people into cowards. At a secret party, Marjane once again fell in love at first sight, convinced she had finally found her soulmate. That day, she carefully dressed up for a date, but was stopped by the morality police. Because makeup was forbidden, Marjane was worried about how to get away. When she noticed a man secretly staring at her from behind, she immediately came up with an idea. She went straight to the officers and told them a man had insulted her. Following Marjane's finger, the police arrested the man, and he now faced possible prison time. Excited, Marjane told her grandmother what had happened, but her upright grandmother flew into a rage. She said Marjane had framed an innocent man, and that was utterly shameful. She had always taught Marjane to be honest and fair. Only then did Marjane realize her mistake, and she felt deeply ashamed. The next day, Marjane met with her boyfriend. The moment they simply held hands, they were arrested by the police. Either pay a ransom or be lashed. Thankfully, Marjane's father heard the news and paid without hesitation to secure their release. In such an environment, falling in love became unbearably difficult. Dating felt like committing a crime. To be together openly, they decided to marry, but Marjane's mother, who always adored her, was heartbroken. She had always hoped her daughter would leave Iran to seek true freedom. After saying this, she threw herself into Marjane's arms and sobbed. At the time, Marjane couldn't fully understand her mother's feelings, but time has a way of making everything clear. 1 year after the wedding, everything had changed. She and her husband barely spoke, living like strangers. Once praised as a model couple, they now made Marjane feel nothing but despair. She wanted a divorce, yet didn't dare. In those days, being known as a divorced woman meant endless judgment and harassment. Helpless and confused, Marjane cried and poured out her heart to her grandmother. Hearing her troubles, her grandmother told her calmly, an unhappy first marriage is just preparation for the second. Next time, you'll choose better. Her words were gentle, yet full of wisdom. Without a doubt, her grandmother was Marjane's lifelong spiritual guide, warm, kind, and wise. Although Marjane still hesitated, one event forced her to decide. Marjane attended an underground party, but the fun didn't last. The police raided the place. During the chaotic escape, a friend of hers fell from a rooftop and died on the spot. At that moment, Marjane made up her mind to leave this frozen land. She refused to spend her life bound by invisible chains. Life was too short, and the world outside was too vast to ignore. She took her grandmother to the seaside for a walk, visited her grandfather's grave, and promised her departed loved ones, I will live honestly, and I will live with integrity. After embracing each family member one by one, Marjane left Tehran forever and never returned. She never saw her grandmother again, but her grandmother's words remained carved in her heart. This is Marjane's journey of growing up in the tide of history. War and oppression never crushed her longing for freedom. Farewells and pain taught her to make peace with herself. The memories of home, her family's loving guidance, and her grandmother's wise counsel all became her strength as she walked the world. No matter where she went, she would never give up on becoming who she truly wanted to be.